when I'm out here at night, I've got a lot of time to think about my life, and one of the things that I think about is, all the people that have passed that I've known. I usually think of the men, the people that you looked up to your whole life. I always had a lot of, respect for my grandmother and everything. So it's not like there's not women. My mother's still alive, and she's, 92, I think. But I think of, my dad, and I think of my brother, my uncle Calvin. I've got a lot of people that I miss. One in particular is my brother, that died a little over 3 years, about almost 4 years ago. He died at 69. But I think about these things when I'm sitting here with all this time going, down the lake. My dad, he was a good dad, but we didn't do a lot together. He was kind of older. We did play horseshoes together and played a little golf together, but he lost his leg. Despite that, still tried to play. He played with my uncle, and so me and my brother had quite a rivalry all of our life because of one time we went golfing with our dad when my brother came from Denver to visit. Well, he had just started in golf, and I was just kind of starting in golf. We both weren't worth a darn at the time, but we were still trying to beat each other, and we kind of carried that all the way up until he died. And, it was a battle back and forth. We even made our own trophy over it, and he'd have it for a while. I'd have to go take it from him. I'd have it, he'd have to come take it from me. And then he moved here for about the last 10 years of his life, and we got to play a lot together and come out here and fish a lot together. We had a lot of good times. And that's the thing about losing people, is that they were just always there throughout your life. You always knew them for the whole 60 years I was alive. He was alive, and then all of a sudden he's not. And that's the one thing I hate about life, is that it's short. I think all the time about when I was growing up. I still have a lot of memories of my childhood. From time to time when I go to Dallas, area, I always want to drive down there on my old street that I grew up from age 7 to 14, because that's kind of the years that, that kind of mattered, that I remember the most. When you're 14 through your high school, and you meet I met my the wife that I have now. I was lucky that we got together in high school, and as beautiful as she is, to have picked somebody as ugly as me was pretty amazing. I'm a pretty lucky man. But she's a good woman, so she's always been happy and stayed with me for almost 44 years now. That aside, you kind of judge your life from your childhood through to your high school, and then you get into the years, the working years. And they last so long. You're so busy, and life just blows by so much during those years. I'm in my 60s. I thought, oh my gosh, people die at that age, This is old people's age, and now I get it that, modern medicine is making us last longer, and that's great. I'm hoping to live to 90 or more. I'm going to try to be as healthy as I can. I'm physically in good shape. Who knows what's going on the inside. I can just go to the doctors and hope that blood tests and colonoscopies and all that keep up with it, catch things and get them taken care of. But the reality is that, that I'm in the retirement years. I get to enjoy these years more. I get to, decide what I'm doing. I get to wake up when I want to. I've never got to know that in my whole life. I've, always been an alarm clock. Get up to the alarm clock, go to work. Even on the weekends, they just seem so short that you don't really get to enjoy them when you're still in your working years now. And especially a lot of years when I was working regularly 5 days a week, and even working on Saturday, when I started my business. So, there was a lot of times that, that I was working 6 days a week. Now, I know boo-hoo, there's some of you working 7 days a week, and I get it. I don't know how many years I'll get to enjoy doing what I'm doing now, I still went and made some money this week. I worked today, actually, and I worked one day last week. But I don't want to work more than 1 day or 2 days a week just to make some side cash. It's not living cash, it's side cash. It's not fun, but see, you know, it's going to be Wednesday in the morning and I'm going to sleep in. And I got to sleep in on Monday. This is really a good time, and I hope it lasts a long time. I just want to know where the years went. I've always pictured, always felt, when you look through your eyes, you don't look at them from the eyes of an old person. You look at them from the eyes of whatever time frame you're remembering. If you're thinking about your childhood, you don't think of yourself as an old person while you're thinking about when you were riding wheelies on your bicycle. And that's the funny thing about when the early 70s and stuff, that's all we did. We just rode bicycles and went and explored in the woods and stuff like that. We didn't sit on our phones and play, we didn't have computer games and stuff. It wasn't computers back then. I remember Atari came out, and it was kind of a boring, sure, it's like anything. You try it once and then you realize how boring it is just trying to Pong or whatever that thing's going on. Or I remember busting myself with clackers, them things you do that and stuff like that. Most of the time, your biggest thing was getting a BB gun and a bicycle and going riding. And I never, I came from, fairly poor people, so I didn't get to have nice fishing rods and stuff like that. I did have a fishing pole, and sometimes we just threw line we found with hooks on them. We just find some grasshoppers and tie them on a stick and throw it out and go play and then come back and have a fish on. That's how we did our fishing sometimes. One of the coolest things I used to do is get bacon and get like kite string or something and just knot it on there, and then we'd stick it down little holes in the water, and you could feel, you could see your line move a little bit, and you would slowly pull out a crawdad, crayfish, or whatever you guys call them there. To us, they were just crawdads. And we had fun doing that. That was a challenge. That's what we did. We were outside. I remember going out into the woods. I don't know how I'm alive. I remember one time we walked up on a moccasin. A big moccasin. And he was coiled up, and his big old mouth was open and hissing, and it was white. And then, I learned right then why they call them cottonmouths, because that's what he looked like. Wow. Big old black snake with a white mouth. He was big. He wasn't a little one. And then I'd see snakes hanging in trees and stuff. We got out there in the woolly woods and, the swampy areas down there in South Irving, or areas. It was spooky back in those days. I survived all that. We just go up to faucets on the side of houses and just get our drinks of water. We didn't run home for a bottle of water or anything. We got thirsty outside. We just run up to one of the neighbors, faucets outside and just start drinking from the faucet. Not from, not even the hose. Sometimes there wasn't a hose there. You just turned on the faucet and drank. If it had a hose, you drink. You had to wait for the the hot water to get out. But I remember me and my best friend, when we were 9 years old, we hopped on our bikes. We lived way on the southeast corner or southwest corner of Irving, Texas. You could see downtown Dallas from our house, and we could always see that big X building, the building that had the X. And we decided one day we were going to go touch that building. So we started early in the morning, and we had no idea how to get there. The only thing you do as a kid is, you just find any trail or road or anything that points in the direction that you're going. And, you eventually get there. And when you got a building to see, you can usually find your way there, but you just stay on something that points in that direction. The problem is that we didn't know our way back because there was no building to come to. So we got lost in Oak Cliff, which was kind of southwest of Dallas and southeast of Irving. And it's famous for where Lee Harvey Oswald got caught. We got lost there, and somebody kind of told us how to get, back to Irving, and we was off the side of some road, and someone in a car came by and slapped me on the back. Thought it was funny and everything, but we made it home. I couldn't tell you how many miles that was. I think that it probably had to be 15 or 20 mile bike ride. Might have been more. You get from southeast or southwest Irving to all the way to downtown Dallas. One of the things I remember in life. Today's that would be called unthinkable to think of a 9-year-old taking off on a bike and doing a trek like that with his friend. Down in Texas, we didn't get any. I remember from the time that I was from 7 to 14 when I lived in Irving, I only remember it snowing twice the whole time, or in a way that it stuck on the ground. And if it snowed in Dallas or in Irving, Texas, you didn't go to school. You played. You took advantage of that. It wasn't going to school in the snow down there. I don't know how much snow they get now, if climate change has affected it in any way and they get more or not. But like I said, I only remember 2 times in all 7 years I lived down there. But I've lived up here in Oklahoma since I was 14, and I'm 64, so that's 50 years now? Surprisingly, I've only seen one tornado with my own eyes. There's been a lot of them pass through this not far from me and everything, but I've actually only seen one. You would think that somebody that's lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma area would have saw more tornadoes than that, but so they're kind of sparsed out. Seems like we have one, at least 3 or 4 or 5 come, in the area every year, but I don't ever see them. They're always just far enough away you don't see them. This is the things you think about in retirement. You think about people you miss, even the stars. Back when I was growing up in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, John Wayne was such a big deal back then. Nowadays, people, they don't even know who he is. Unless you're my age, most of you don't know how big John Wayne was back in the day. So, in these retirement years, I think about me and my wife. We've spent so many years together. We're, 44, and when you add up the year, the year and a half or 2 we were together, we've spent a long time together. And the sad reality is unless, we die in an airplane crash together or a car crash together, one of us is going to have to spend some time on this earth without the other one. And that's going to be tough. I mean, I can't imagine, the people that have had to do it, I feel for you. I'm just so lucky and blessed that I've still got my wife. I don't, we're still young 60s, so I've got a lot of good time. I hope we've got a lot of good years together. We're going to take some trips. We've been to a lot of places here in the United States. We've been to Cancun. But, we're going to try to travel, see more things. We're going to travel a lot through Utah come September. And I'll probably share some of that on this channel just because it's just part of being retired. We want to enjoy life and see as much as we can. A lot of people in life, especially, previous to the age of the car and planes, never really, got outside their circle. They may have never been outside of a 20 or 30 or 50 mile out radius because it's a big deal to move around that much. The people that that were moving during the expansion of across the country that would even know, boy, they got a perspective of this country that we never get. Traveling through it when it was wild and open and no cities and having to deal with Indians, wild animals, and all the stuff that comes with being pioneers in a new area, in a new place. But they also had the perspective of seeing it when it was clean and natural and amazing, and the trees they had to have seen, back in those days, because really there's not very many trees left in the United States that haven't, you know, that were here 200 or 300 years ago. You've got some of those redwoods out there that are protected, but there's not very many trees because a lot of, you know, trees were cut down for housing and building railroads and stuff like that. So we're not getting to see the land as it was back during the pioneer days, 1700s and the 1800s. So that had to have been something, you know, for them, but it was also harsh. But today, you know, we've got it so easy. I'm glad for that. I'm glad that I was raised in this era. I'm sure that people 300 or 400 or 500 years from now are going to think we're living in the, you know, the boony days, and things are going to be, I can see people having cars that fly. It's already starting to see little stuff like that coming out now. Whether we'll get to the point where we can like teleport and do all that stuff, I don't know, but can imagine that, you know, that science is going to keep advancing and things are going to be pretty weird, you know, 100 years from now, 200, 500, 1,000. But I'm happy to be here in the time that I am. I'm going to fish, you know, especially more after the heat settles down. Certainly going to be starting to play more golf. Actually had another one of them weird rounds last Friday. Now I play with these guys and we play for $1. We have $1. Well, we have $1 on. We have what's called 7 points, and those are, you know, your front 9. Whoever's got the low round on the front 9, the low round on the second 9, the overall low, you know, whoever had the overall. And then there's 4 greenies for par 3s, and if whoever's closest to the pin on all, you know, on any one of them, and you're able to 2-putt them, then you get a point. So that's the 7 points, and I got quite a few. I think I don't know that I didn't get almost all the points last week, but strangely I started out the first 4 holes I went 6 over. I went bogey, double, bogey, double, or I went bogey, bogey, double, double. Yeah, I went bogey, double, or bogey, bogey, double, double. I was able to shoot 1 over par the next 14 holes to come out, still shoot 79. After starting off with 6 over, I ended up 7 over after. And so I had, like, I think 3 bogeys after that and 2 birdies. So that was 1 over, you know, for the next 14 holes. And of course my playing buddies, you know, they were licking their chops thinking that, boy, they're getting my money today. Already giving up all them strokes on the first 4 holes. So, but I always try to make sure that I don't let those holes ruin my day. And I've always said, you know, as long as I can play the rest of the holes even par, as long as I can play it doesn't matter how many are left, I'm going to try to play the last ones even par. And you know, that's, as long as you know you can do that. You know, you get the mind right, you know, it can happen. It happens to me a lot. I have what's called Jekyll and Hyde days. Have a really bad 9 and a really good 9. You know, it's, you know, I think I was 42 on the front and 37 on the back. So that's pretty, you know, in my game, that's a big jump. That's what retirement's going to look like: golf, fishing, remembering, playing guitar. I'm actually feel like I'm making some headway there. My fingers are getting calloused now where I can spend more time, and I know enough chords to start putting together some songs. I'm still struggling with that D chord. If I could, you know, and C kind of, you know, C's kind of easy, but it's hard not to lay your finger on the bottom string. But I'm going to start doing that. I may actually do a video if I ever get good enough. I'll do 1 or 2 courses of some songs just so you can see how I'm doing in that. I really want to start doing some camping. I haven't, done very much of that. I always, starting out, I don't know if this is normal, but I do a lot of, what I consider remote camping, and I think what they call it is boondocking. You're not really in a campsite area that's, where you feel like there's, kind of, like more people there, and everybody's kind of, watches out for each other to some degree or whatever. But when you're kind of remote, kind of in some areas that you just always have this uneasy feeling that there might be somebody gonna come up on you, and I've always had that feeling every time I've, went camping. And there, there was even one time when I was planning on camping all night and fishing on, I've got this spot I really like, but there was a car pulled up, and he wasn't more than 100 yards away from me, just sitting there. And I've had this happen to me twice, actually. And it makes me nervous. Even if they leave, this one didn't leave. The first, one of them didn't leave. I just left. I thought, I don't know what this guy, what's going on here, but I don't want to find out. And even if you're on your own, you wonder, So I haven't learned to get uneasy about camping. It's not like it used to be. I mean, this world's not, I remember when I was younger, we'd go camping, on deer camp, or we'd go, now, usually when we went, there was 3 or 4 or 5 of us. So, when you're in those situations, you don't really, you don't even think about it. I mean, you feel like you've got plenty of people around you. But anytime you're by yourself, it just seems weird. And I built my truck to have, to be able to camp in the back of it, fairly comfortably. I've got it where it's carpeted. I've got it with a little bed area. I've got electrical, I can run a fan, I can run lights, I can do a lot of things. I keep a lot of, camp, all the, the burners and the stuff, to cook with. And so it's, it's pretty relaxing, way to camp. But the one thing I don't like about camping out of the back of a truck is that if you felt the need to, you felt like if something was outside. Now, animals I'm not afraid of. Even a bear, it wouldn't scare me. Not that I would have that problem in Oklahoma, and I could. I mean, I'm planning on going to southeast Oklahoma, and there are bears down there. But I'm not really worried about a bear getting me in my truck, in my thing. What I do worry about is strangers. And if a stranger comes up, you're kind of cooped up in your own little prison there, It's not like you can, to me, if you think, if the whole point is to exit as quick as possible, you're gonna have to climb out of there and get, go and unlock your truck and start it up and go, And, if somebody's messing with you, there's no chance to do that. But, a lot of these people that are doing van life, a lot of retirees, and, there's even young people doing it. At least if you're in your van, you can crawl into your front driver area, start that baby up, and peel out, You can always have it set up to where you can, just jump in, turn the key, and go, But I can't do that in my back of my truck. So, the van that I used for all my deliveries for the last 10 years, I'm thinking about turning it into a camping van. and I'll be doing videos on it, and they'll probably be posted on my fishing channel. But I may do some, you know, you may get to see some of that, maybe some camping where I go in that, because I would feel a lot more comfortable camping in a van. Now I'm going to be limited, you know, my truck can go a lot of places that this van won't be able to go. My truck's a four-wheel drive, and it's a short bed, and it's pretty handy in the off-road. But so I'm going to have to be, you know, selective of where I take the other van. There's, you know, my favorite spot, no way I'm getting a van down there. Too many steep little areas and twists and turns, and you know, oh, something hit it. But the, you know, the van can't go everywhere I want it to go. So and even if it was one of those, you know, pricey four-wheel drive ones, you know, I still would not try to get it into the areas I can get that truck of mine. So I'll do some selective camping. I may do those, you know, if I don't sell the thing here in the next month, I'm probably going to start doing videos on that. So that'll be fun.